4 words. That is all it takes. You have been in this business for 19 years. You have survived 3 wars, the kind fought with lawyers and the kind fought with other methods. You have moved product through 12 countries. You have built something that Europol has spent 4 years and 40 million euros trying to understand, and they still only know half of it. 4 words, and all of that is now on a clock. The message is from your man in Antwerp. He has a contact inside the Belgian Federal Police, a junior investigator, expensive but reliable. The message says what your man in Antwerp has just learned. They have the messages. Sky ECC, the encrypted phone network that you and every serious operator in Europe has used for the last 3 years. The network that was supposed to be unbreakable. Apparently, it was not unbreakable. You stand at the glass and look at Dubai for a long time. Then you open the laptop. You open the spreadsheet, the one that looks to any investigator who might find it, like a logistics management file for a fruit import company. To you, it is the map of the next 72 hours. You have a lot of calls to make, and a lot of decisions that cannot be unmade. You grew up in a village in the Skoder region, in the north. If you describe this to a European, a Belgian, a German, a British person, you would need to explain what northern Albania was in 1991. You would need to explain that Enver Hoxha had turned the country into the most isolated nation on earth, that for 46 years, no one left and nothing came in. That when communism fell, there was no economy, no functioning state, no police force worth the name, and approximately 3 million people who had lived their entire lives under a system that had just, overnight, ceased to exist. Into that vacuum, certain things returned. The canon of Leke Dukajini had been banned under Hoxha. Forbidden, punished, suppressed, but you cannot ban a code that lives in the memory of every family in the north, passed from grandfather to father to son across 6 centuries. When the state collapsed, the canon came back. In 1997 alone, 73% of all violent deaths in Albania were classified as revenge killings. You grew up understanding the canon the way other children understand traffic lights, not as an abstraction, as the actual operating system of daily life. Besa, the word of honor, the solemn oath, the bond between men that is held more sacred than any contract, any legal document, any promise made to the state. If you give your Besa, you keep it. If someone breaks their Besa to you, there are consequences that no court and no prison can substitute for jegmerja, the blood obligation. Koka per koke, head for a head. An insult to the family that is not addressed is an insult that festers down generations. Fis, the clan. The family unit extended across cousins and uncles and old alliances, the web of obligation and loyalty that binds people who have lived in the same mountains for 400 years. These are not things you adopted as a criminal, these are things you were born into. When you're 20 years old and the country has fallen apart and there is nothing, no work, no money, no state, no future in the legal sense. The canon gives you the one thing that still has value, a framework, a code, rules that people actually follow, because the consequences of not following them are immediate and personal in a way that no distant bureaucracy can replicate. You leave Albania in 1997. During the collapse, when the pyramid scheme fraud takes down the government and 40% of the population loses everything and the streets fill with stolen army weapons, you go to Kosovo, then to Belgium, then for a while to London. You carry nothing except your language, your family name, and the canon in your head. In London, you learn the structure of the drug trade from the bottom up, and you find that the canon is unexpectedly a competitive advantage. Here's what you learn in London and then in Antwerp over a decade of watching how the trade works. The Italian Ndrangheta has been running cocaine from South America to Europe since the 1980s. They are formidable, disciplined, territorially organized, politically connected in Calabria and across the Italian diaspora, but they are also rigid, hierarchical, rooted in a specific geography, specific blood ties, a specific way of doing things that has been the same for 3 generations. When a new opportunity appears, the Ndrangheta moves carefully, because the entire structure needs to adjust. Albanian groups move differently. There's no single Albanian mafia. This is what the newspapers get wrong. The idea of a unified organization with a boss at the top sending instructions down. The reality is independent networks connected by trust and family and Besa that cooperate on specific operations, split the risk and the profit, and dissolve when the operation is complete. No single point of failure, no single structure that law enforcement can dismantle. You work with the Ndrangheta in the early 2000s as a logistics specialist, you move things, you know the port. You have people inside who can flag which containers will be subjected to the automated scanning system and which ones will pass through on the manifest alone. You're reliable. You keep your Besa, you do not steal, you do not create problems. You bring in your percentage and you ask for nothing more than what was agreed. The Italians teach you the cocaine supply chain. You teach yourself everything else. By 2010, you are not working for the Ndrangheta. You're working alongside them as an equal partner on specific operations. You have your own source contacts in Colombia and Bolivia made during 2 years of patient presence in South America, building relationships in Guayaquil and in the Paraguayan border region, where the Colombians and Bolivians move product into containers. By 2015, you are the source, not the only source. You're not stupid enough to try to control everything, but you are one of the primary wholesale importers of cocaine to the European market, moving product through Antwerp and Hamburg with a network of corrupt dock workers, customs officials, and transport companies that has taken 10 years to build and cannot be replicated quickly by anyone who tries to compete with you. And the phone network Sky ECC. Before that, EncroChat, before that, PGP encrypted Blackberries. The logic is the same each time. If your communications cannot be read, you do not exist to law enforcement. You're a ghost operating inside a legal economy. Your shell companies in Cyprus and the UAE export and import legitimate goods. Your container shipments are mostly actually legitimate goods. Coconut soap from Ecuador, plaster adhesive paint tins, wall putty. The cocaine is hidden in double-layered compartments inside the legitimate cargo, recovered after customs clearance by people who have no idea who hired them and no record of who paid them. You never touch the product. You have never touched the product. Not once in 19 years. You're a logistics company. You're a broker. You are, in the language that your Sky ECC contacts use when they discuss their business, a service provider. Walk through the operation. Because the operation is the thing that most people, even people who write about organized crime for a living, do not fully understand. The cocaine is produced in Colombia and Bolivia. It moves into Paraguay through a network of local operators. You have learned over years which local Paraguayan political figures can be reached and at what price, and which local criminal groups control the logistics corridors from the production zone to the container port at Asunción. In Paraguay, the cocaine is packed. This is skilled work. The concealment must survive. X-ray scanning and drug dog inspection. The standard method is to hide compressed bricks of cocaine inside legitimate product, inside sealed containers of soap, inside tins of paint or industrial chemicals, inside the cavity walls of refrigeration units. The packaging must be identical to legitimate product at the surface. The cocaine bricks are wrapped in aluminum foil and then in the chemical packaging of the legitimate good, with odor-suppressant compounds applied to reduce the scent signature. The shipment leaves Paraguay. The manifest lists the cargo as legitimate goods destined for a legitimate company in a legitimate European country. The receiving company, which you control through a chain of shell companies, is registered in good standing, has a track record of imports, pays its taxes, has no criminal history. The container arrives in Antwerp, then Antwerp, the primary entry point for cocaine to Europe. In 2020, 90 tons of cocaine were seized in Antwerp alone. 90 tons seized means, by conservative estimate, 5 to 10 times that amount passed through undetected. The port processes over 12 million containers per year. Inspectors can meaningfully examine perhaps 2 or 3% of them. Your people inside the port, dock workers, a logistics supervisor, a customs contact, identify the container early. They know which shift is working. They know which scanner unit is operational and which is under maintenance. They know the container inspection schedule for that day. The information flows through your network. The pickup team is positioned outside the port in a rented van with the paperwork that allows them to collect the cargo once it's cleared. The cargo clears, the van picks it up, the cocaine, 12 tons of it, on the November 2020 shipment, the largest in history at that point, is sold within 3 weeks, 7.8 tons in 3 days. Your wholesale price at the port is approximately 30,000 euros per kilogram, 12 tons times 30,000 euros. You do not calculate this in real time. You have people who do the calculations. What you calculate is the risk, always the risk. Because the money is a consequence of managing the risk correctly, and the risk is always changing. November 5, 2020. 2 of your people in Belgium exchange messages on Sky ECC about the Antwerp shipment. You know about this message now, you know about it because 18 months later, when Europol cracks the Sky ECC network and Belgian investigators sift through 1 billion encrypted messages, this message will be one of the ones they read. They will call it the Rosetta Stone of organized crime in Europe. But in November 2020, neither you nor your people know that the clock has already started. You're managing the most profitable logistics operation in European criminal history from a secure phone application that you believe is unbreakable. And you're right, for another 4 months. The thing that keeps your operation running is not the logistics. Logistics can be learned. Port contacts can be developed, shell companies can be incorporated. The technical side of cocaine trafficking in 2021 is at the senior level, not dramatically more complex than managing a mid-sized import business, except that the consequences of error are measured differently. What cannot be replicated, what took 19 years to build, is the trust network. Trust in the Canaan sense, BESA, not a sentiment, a binding obligation. When you tell someone that a shipment will be at a certain port on a certain date, in a certain container, They believe you because your reputation for keeping your word has been maintained across 2 decades and across multiple countries and across every kind of disruption, arrests, seizures, betrayals, police operations that would have destroyed a less reliable operation. Belgian police, when they later analyze the Sky ECC messages, will describe Albanian criminal groups as being characterized by unusual discipline, reliability, and professionalism. These are the words police use what they are describing without knowing the cultural framework is the kanun. It is not loyalty as a warm feeling. It is loyalty as an obligation that has consequences. You have relationships with 3 Ndrangheta clans in Calabria. These relationships were built slowly, carefully, over years. The Italians initially did not trust you. You were a newcomer, a Balkan, an unknown quantity. You proved yourself on smaller operations. You delivered what you said you would deliver. You accepted your percentage without complaint. You never created problems for the Italians with other parties. Over time, the relationship shifted from mentorship to partnership to in certain specific operations, you being the one with the resources and contacts that the Italians needed. The Ndrangheta has been running cocaine since before you were born. They have the South American contacts, the European distribution network, the political connections in Italy. What they increasingly need in the late 2010s is someone who can move the volume they want to move through the ports, because the port infrastructure is the bottleneck. Here's what you know standing in this room in Dubai on the morning of March 9, 2021. You know that Europol has data. The question is how much and how it will be used. Investigations of this scale take years. Arrests of senior figures require extradition treaties, and Dubai has historically been complicated. There is time. You know that some of your people are already arrested, and talking people who are arrested and facing 20 years have a complicated relationship with loyalty. Besa is a cultural principle, not a physical law. Some of your people will keep their besa, some will not. You know that your money, the real estate, the resort, the agricultural land in Paraguay, the accounts in Cyprus is traceable if investigators have enough time, enough cooperation between jurisdictions, and enough resources. SPAC, Albania's anti-corruption and organized crime unit, is now receiving significant support from the FBI, from Europol, from the Belgians. They will start with the obvious things, the resort in Shijak, the apartments in Tirana, and work backward through the financial architecture. And you know that in December of this year, Frank Shopia, the financier, the man who ran the European end of the Antwerp operation, the man whose name appears throughout the Sky ECC messages alongside yours, will be arrested in the UAE and extradited to Belgium, where he is charged with premeditated murder related to a drug dispute in Brussels. That last one is significant, not because of Shopia specifically, but because it means the UAE is no longer the safe harbor it appeared to be. The extradition of drug lords from Dubai to European jurisdictions, once unthinkable, has become a tool of international law enforcement. Dubai arrested and extradited 13 suspects to Belgium in Sky ECC-related cases. 13. The geography of safety is shrinking. There is a specific quality to the reckoning of someone who has built something vast and watched it begin to come apart. It is not dramatic. It is not the film version of a criminal empire collapsing, the shootout, the betrayal, the single moment of catastrophic failure. It is something quieter and more terrible than that. It is the feeling of all the calculations you ran for 19 years, the careful management of risk, the layers of insulation, the meticulous separation between yourself and the product, the basic kept with 100 different people in a dozen countries, being slowly invalidated by a technology failure, not a moral failure, not a betrayal, a technology failure. The Belgian investigators who cracked Sky ECC described it as a Rosetta Stone. That metaphor is more accurate than they know. The Rosetta Stone was not an act of violence. It was the discovery of a key that made an encrypted language suddenly readable. The Sky ECC crack did the same thing. Every message you sent for 3 years, every logistics discussion, every payment reference, every operational communication is now readable by people who have been looking for you for years. You built your operation on the principle of compartmentalization. No single person knows the whole picture. Every intermediary only knows their own piece. The coca broker in Guayaquil knows the shipment schedule, but not the European distribution network. The port contact in Antwerp knows the container number, but not who finances the shipment. The money launderer in Cyprus knows the account details, but not where the money originated. But you talk to all of them on Sky ECCU personally. Because at a certain level of operation, personal communication is necessary. Because BESA requires the principal to be present, not just a representative. Because the kind of trust that moves 12 tons of cocaine from Paraguay to Antwerp requires the kind of relationship that cannot be fully managed by intermediaries. And so they have you. Here's what this organization built in 19 years, starting from a village in the Shkodra region with nothing except a cultural framework and the willingness to work. A supply chain stretching from coca fields in Colombia and Bolivia, through processing in Paraguay, through concealment and shipping across the Atlantic, through port infrastructure corruption in Antwerp and Hamburg, through wholesale distribution to criminal networks across 12 European countries, through money laundering via hawala and shell companies and real estate, into a legitimate economy that now holds resorts and apartments and agricultural land and a sushi restaurant with excellent security. At its peak, this network moved tens of tons of cocaine into Europe within a few months. The revenue is incalculable in any precise sense because the prices shift and the losses from seizures must be written off and the corruption costs are significant. But the street value of the product this network moved in a single year would pay the annual budget of a small country, all of it built on the Kanun. On Bisa, on the understanding that your word once given is kept. On the principle that loyalty to the fiyes, to the clan, to the family network, to the people who have trusted you since before you had anything worth trusting, is not optional. The Kanun was written for a mountain society with no state, no police, no courts, and no mechanism for enforcing agreements except social obligation and the threat of Jijik Marija. It survived the Ottomans and communism and the collapse of 1991 because it addresses a fundamental human problem. How do you make binding commitments in an environment where no external authority can enforce them? The answer the Kanun gives is, you make the breach of commitment personally catastrophic, not legally catastrophic, personally. What the Kanun did not anticipate was a technology that could read every communication you had ever made. In a cafe in a village you could find on no tourist map, you sit across from men you have known since childhood. They ask the question that is being asked throughout the network, from Antwerp to Tirana to London to Guayaquil, what now? You have an answer. Not because you're optimistic about what is coming. You have too good an understanding of what Europol has and what Albanian prosecutors will do with it when the international pressure requires them to act, to be optimistic. But because the question of what to do next is a logistics problem. And logistics problems have solutions, the port contacts in Antwerp are compromised. Hamburg is heavily scrutinized. The Sky ECC cases will take years to prosecute, and the most senior figures are in Dubai or underground, or in your case, in a village that is technically accessible to Albanian law enforcement, but that has its own relationship with state authority. New routes, new ports, Valencia in Spain has become significant. Algeciras, Constanta in Romania. The network adapts. The network has always adapted. When EncroChat was cracked, you moved to Sky ECC. Sky ECC is gone. There will be something else, new structures. The old organizational map, preserved in a billion Sky ECC messages in a Belgian police evidence room, needs to be rebuilt. More compartmentalized, less communication at the senior level, more reliance on Bisa and face-to-face meeting, and the kind of trust that does not require a messaging app. More expensive, more slow, less scalable than what you had, but still profitable because the demand never stops. European cocaine consumption has increased every year for the last decade. The customers are in London, in Paris, in Berlin, in Amsterdam, in Brussels, in the offices and the clubs and the restaurants and the back rooms and the private parties of the most prosperous cities in the world. They are not criminals. Most of them, they are people who want something, and they do not ask about the supply chain. Someone will always supply them. The question is whether that someone is you or the next person. That is not a rhetorical question. You're sitting in a mountain cafe in northern Albania, drinking coffee with the Albanian prosecutor's office receiving technical assistance from the FBI and Europol, and investigators in Belgium going through 1 billion messages with your name in them. You gave your Bisa to your FIs, to your network, to the men in this cafe a long time ago. The Kanun says the word of honor is the cornerstone of personal and social conduct. The Kanun says that a man without Bisa is a man without standing. The Kanun does not say anything about encrypted messaging applications. It does not say anything about Europol. It was written for a world where the greatest threat to an honorable man was another honorable man. The world, it turns out, has changed. You drink your coffee, you look at the mountains. The mountains are the same as they have always been. Everything else is different.